Let's check. Did it start? I don't know why my Brave browser might have to use Brave. There's some problem with this browser. Let's 147.
Bob's role is one of the most viewed React instructors.
One thing that I really liked.
Okay, let's start. Uh, this is my project. I'm going to start this. I'm going to put this into next screen, so that's why it would be easy for me. Okay, just some kind of thing that might make my life easy with this left. Okay.
To do when I'm starting a new project, especially if I have the design right in front of me like we do here, is to make a sort of mental outline of the elements on the page and how I'm going to lay this project out. All that really helps me do is to make a sort of mental model of how I'm going to create everything on the page. This can be especially helpful when you're thinking about layout and how you're going to place certain elements in the right spot on the page, especially when you start thinking in terms of using Flexbox or Grid to do that kind of layout. So as a first sort of mini challenge, what I want you to do is pause the screencast and look at this page, try to determine what kind of elements you would use, what kinds of CSS layouts you might use. Fortunately, this project has a fairly simple layout, but I still think that it's something that will be helpful for you to practice. So pause the screencast and try to imagine what elements you would use and how you would lay them out for this project. There's certainly more than one way to lay out any given page, but the way that I see this is having two primary sections. The top section, which is sort of a nav bar, and the bottom section, which is sort of the main content. Inside that nav bar, we have a little React logo, the React Facts logo text up here, and then a little blurb about what project this is in this course. Already, I can start to see that I'm probably going to choose to lay this out with Flexbox because that's a really easy way to make sure everything's in a nice, neat line. And with Flexbox, all I need to do to push this text all the way to the right is to give an auto margin to my React Facts text here, or rather a margin right. I'm going to choose to lay this out with Flexbox because that's a really easy way to make sure everything's in a nice, neat line. And with Flexbox, all I need to do to push this text all the way to the right is to give an auto margin to my React Facts text here, or rather a margin right of auto, so that it pushes this React Course Project 1 text all the way to the right side of my navigation bar. Then down below, it looks like I just have an H1 and an unordered list with some list items. So with this kind of mental outline, I can start putting together what the actual elements will look like on the page. I usually end up creating some kind of container div, so we'll call it a div with the class of container, and this will just surround my whole page. And then we have our main two sections, that nav bar, which we saw at the top, and the main section. Inside the nav bar, we had a couple elements like the image, and then maybe let's call the React Facts text an H3, and this React Course Project 1 an H4. And then in the main section, there was our H1 and an unordered list with some list items inside. Now, in terms of React, this can be a really helpful exercise because I can start to see that I will probably have two main components. First, a custom nav component, which will house my nav element with its children elements. And second, a main custom component, which will house my h1 and my unordered list with the list items. In terms of those nested items like the image in H3, those are going to be simple enough that they won't need their own custom React component. And then I would tip with the list items. In terms of those nested items like the image in H3, those are going to be simple enough that they won't need their own custom. Will house my H1 and my unordered list with the list items. In terms of those nested items like the image in H3, those are going to be simple enough that they won't need their own custom React component. And then I would take my custom nav component and my custom main component and probably collect them together in one more custom component, which I usually end up calling app. And then I would take my simplest items. In terms of those nested items like the image in H3, those are going to be simple enough that they won't need their own custom React component. And then I would take my custom nav component and my custom main component and probably collect them together in one more custom component, which I usually end up calling app. And that will be what renders my div with the class of container. And then that app component, since it contains all the elements on my project, will then be rendered with React DOM.render. So I hope this has been a helpful exercise for you, at least to see the way that I usually like to kind of think about it ahead of time without actually writing it down or putting a bunch of dotted squares around the elements or anything like that. But once you've practiced this enough times, a simple layout like this might take you a total of maybe 10 seconds to think through, but in the end could end up saving you a lot of time. So now it's time for us to get your hands on the keyboard. We're going to have a series of challenges, which will help you be the one that actually builds out this project. Hey there, I'm jumping in at this point to let you know that I've created a very quick Figma tutorial. Throughout this course and many others here on Scrimba, we're going to be providing you with a Figma design file, and I do think you'll find Figma fairly intuitive, but I thought it would be a good idea to just record a quick tutorial to help you along. The first thing you'll have to do is go over to figma.com and create a new account. And as I was signing up for a second account just to kind of test this process, I realized that there's actually a lot of steps, so I figured I would walk you through it. First, you're going to click sign up. You'll obviously either sign up with Google or you can provide an email and password. I believe if you provide an email and password, it will have you go verify your email, so it'll send you an email to verify. Once you've done that and you come back, it will have you choose which kind of plan you want. Figma has a really generous free tier, so I would just start for free. You'll click that button down there. When it asks you to tell you about your team, you can, at this point, honestly just say skip this step. And then when it says, what would you like to do first? I just think it's easiest to say, I'll explore by myself. And when you do that, it's going to drop you into the Figma interface. Now, from that point on, I've actually recorded a whole tutorial using the Figma program that is now over on the Scrimba YouTube channel. So at this point, you're going to continue onto YouTube by clicking on the screenshot here, which will take you to the video that I recorded. And hopefully that quick introduction to Figma will really help make things easier for you as you use Figma as a part of your Scrimba coursework. So click on the screenshot you see here, head over to YouTube. When you've watched that video and you're done, you can close that window, come back here to Scrimba and continue on in this course. Let's start by getting some of the project setup out of the way. I've written some step-by-step instructions here in the challenge. It is going to be a little bit more involved because we're creating everything completely from scratch, or almost completely from scratch. So your challenge is to create a components folder, and this components folder is going to have two files in it, the navbar.js file and the main.js file. For now, they should just render an H1 that says something like navbar goes here and main section here. Then I want you to create an app component, which will be outside of the components folder, and have the app component render the navbar and main components that you just created. Then inside of this file, the index.js, you will import the app component and then use React DOM.render to render that. The last step is to go and get the Inter Google font, specifically with the weights of 400, 600, and 700. Once you've selected those font weights, you should see a series of link tags that you can use to put inside of our index.html. Make sure to put them above style.css so that we can reference them in style.css. 300, 600 is the components that you just created. Project setup out of the way. I've written some step-by-step instructions here in the challenge. It is going to be a little bit more involved because we're creating everything completely from scratch, or almost completely from scratch. So your challenge is to create a components folder, and this components folder is going to have two files in it, the navbar.js file and the main.js file. For now, they should just render an H1 that says something like navbar goes here and main section. This folder is going to have two files in it, the navbar.js file and the main.js file. For now, they should just render an H1 that says something like navbar goes here and main section here. Then I want you to create an app component, which will be outside of the components folder. And have the app component render the navbar and main components that you just created. Then inside of this file, the index.js, you will import the app component and then use react dom.render to render that. The last step is to go go and get the Enter Google font. Specific in this file, the index.js, you will import the app component and then use React DOM.render to render that. The last step is to go and get the Enter Google font, specifically with the weights of 400, 600, and 700. Once you've
do coding after understanding theory first in this video. React project structure. In public, our important file is index.html, which is very similar to the static index.html which we have before. Okay, now this time no libraries or script are being loaded in, as we have seen that in our React with CDN we have scripts to load. So here we have no libraries, no script to load.
React
The
project
source
structure.
directory will contain all our React code, and just update your React code in source app.js to see magic. So here we are in VS Code where we left.
Hi friends, this is Leela. Welcome to my channel Leela Web Dev. We have reached the end of this React.js course. The thing what is left over to learn from in this course is deployment. So at last we have developed a project. We have developed the complete project, and now the thing what we need to do is we need to deploy this project. How we can deploy this? Actually, how we are running is, so if you try to see npm start, we are using this npm start command and we are running the project. So using this command, it is only in the debug process, it is in the development only. So in order to deploy this project, what we need to do is we need to build this one in a production mode. Well, in order to deploy this project is, so if you try to see npm start, we are using this npm start command and we are running the project. So using this command, it is only in the debug process, it is in the development only. Start, we are using this npm start command and we are running the project. So using this command, it is only in the debug process, it is in the development only. So in order to deploy this project, what we need to do is we need to build this one in a production mode. Well, now what we need to do is first what we need to do is we need to go to the app.js file, and here in this one what you can see is index.js file. So you need to go to the index.js file, and here you will be able to see that here you are having a browser router, and one concept what you will be having is the base name. Okay, you can set the base path for this one. So the base name. So base name is nothing but what we can say is, so if your project is hosted in such a way that www.example.com/abc, so it is, you are hosting that one in internal page, something like /abc, so that example.com/abc is the home page of yours. Then you need to mention the base name here as something like /abc. So you need to mention here. Okay, so like this you need to mention the internal page. If you are having something like www.example.com as your home page only, there is no need to mention. So first, you need to remember this thing. And another thing what you need to remember is, so after completing this one, what we need to do is, so here we can stop this server. Okay, now we need to use the command npm run build. Okay, so we need to use the command npm run build. This command what it will try to do is it will try to compile all the files into the production mode, and it will create a new folder with the name build. So let's try to see. So I am typing this command npm run build. So let's try to see how it will be building. Now you will be able to see the build folder. So let's try to see. So we will try to see here. It is trying to create a production build for us. Completed, you will be able to see that all the files have been created here. Build static, these all the folders have been created. Now if you try to see in the project explorer, you will be able to see here one new folder. Explore that folder, file explorer. Here in the command, open this build folder, having one extra involved. It is nothing but this static folder. So this is the place where all the css and js files involved in our project will be there. So now here in the css folder, if I open, so these are all the css files which are involved. So these are all the lazy loaded chunk files with the min map also. So if you want this min map, you can use, or otherwise you can exclude this min map also. And these are all the chunk files, everything, whatever the chunk files and everything js files involved for the project has been built here. So now when it's coming out of this project, this is the index.html file. So this index.html file is the main folder, so which we need to target. So if you are typing www.example.com is, this is the folder this is the home file which need to be executed. So this is the complete total. So these are all whatever the files that are pushing server, so that everything is completed. So now if you want to check, you can also check that it is telling that run please serve -s build. So if you don't have the serve command, just you can use npm install -g serve. So you can install this one using npm install -g serve. So I have already installed, so I can use serve -s build. what this command will do is, sorry, not server, serve. So what this command will do is, so it will try to open the localhost, that it will try to build a development server and try to access the build folder. So you can directly check that whether the build folder, the content present in the build folder is working correctly or not. You can take this localhost and you can directly open it here. See, I am able to or not. You can take this localhost and you can content present in the build folder is working correctly or not. You can take this localhost and you can directly open it here. See, I am able to open. So now the project is running fine.
selected those font weights, you should see a series of link tags that you can use to put inside of our index.
Before we
index.html. Make sure to put them above style.css so that we can reference them in style.css. And if you haven't used Google Fonts before, this one might take a little bit of extra research outside of Scrimba here to learn more about. But I know that you can do it. Fortunately, Google Fonts makes it relatively easy. Just know that you can ignore the @import or any npm options it talks about for installing this font. Remember, we're not dealing with any kind of styling right now, so by the end of this challenge, you'll just have a basic white page that just shows navbar here and main section here, or something like that. So pause now and work on this challenge. Okay, let's
have our project, here it is
just go one step at a time. We'll first create a new folder called components. And inside components, we can create a new file for main.js and navbar.js. As always, this is just going to return an h1 that, let's have it say navbar component. Then our main.js is going to be almost identical. We'll just copy this, paste it in, and instead of navbar component, we'll say main component, and we'll call this element the main element. Okay, I'll hit save. This is just going to bring up my preview window, but that's still empty. So I need to create a new file called app.js. And inside of app.js, again, we'll import React from React. We'll also import our navbar component from ./components/navbar. And we'll do the same thing for main. So I'll just duplicate that line and change navbar to main. Then this app component, we will export directly here with export default function app. And we will just have this return. Well, we want our navbar to be in here. So we'll say navbar, and we want our main component to be in here. But I want you to think for a second, what's wrong with the way that I've done this? We can see there's a syntax error. So what's wrong with the way that I've set this up? To have, so I'll move this be set up as a going to need it. Okay. Let's go check out our challenge. My app component, which is rendering the navbar and main components. So here we are. Let's import and render the app component here. I will import app from /app. Oh, and I am going to be using some JSX syntax, so I'll need to import React just imported. And we're going to save and see if we get our elements showing challenge. And then the last, so I'm just going into my index.html and static, but then this one is for our actual fonts. Here's a link element, so I'm just going into my index.html. And above my style.css, I will just paste in those link elements. You can see that we have this pre-connect to Google Fonts, this one to gstatic. Above my style.css, I will just paste in those link elements. You can see that we have this pre-connect to Google Fonts, this one to gstatic, but then this one is for our actual fonts. Here you can see the font family is Inter, and it shows our weights of 400, 600, and 700 there. Again, I'm putting this above my style.css so that inside of my style.css, I can reference the font family of Inter, and my browser will have already read these other link tags to know exactly what the Inter font is. Okay, let's go back here, and we have finished everything from this challenge. I'll just do a little bit of cleanup. Now, we did just cover a lot of ground. However, every step that we did here was something that you should have already been able to do, maybe with the exception to the Google Fonts if you've never dealt with Google Fonts before. So if you did find yourself struggling to get some of this basic setup done, that might be a good signal to you that it's time to go back and restudy and especially repractice some of the past challenges that we've done instead of just kind of plowing ahead in this course. The reason for that is because I'm essentially going to assume that you understood how this works from here on. And the last thing that I would want for you as you're learning React is to just continue on without actually having learned some of these basic setup principles. Okay, let's jump into maybe something a little more fun, and that is adding some actual styling and elements to our project. But before we move on, I wanted to give you one more opportunity to access the Figma design file. We talked about this much earlier in this section, but since it's been a while, I figured this would be a good reminder. If you click on the screenshot here, it will take you to the Figma file where you can get access to the design version of this. However, if you'd like, you can avoid seeing it. That'll make it so that you aren't seeing everyone else's cursors and selections, but also so that you can make changes to it if you'd like. Okay, let's do it. Let's jump right in and start working on the navbar portion of our project. Okay, this is the fun part. We're actually going to make our navigation bar look the way that it looks in the design. A couple pieces of advice. I highly recommend you reference the Figma file that contains all of the fonts, colors, spacing, and everything instead of just looking at this quick reference that I've put here, but this is meant to be just a quick reference for you if you need it. Another thing is I have added a couple of base styles to our styles.css. I ran into some problems trying to record this without putting my box sizing. And just because it helps a lot, I'm going to remove the margin on the body, especially to make our navigation bar go all the way to the edges. Also notice that I have included the React icon small image here inside of the images folder. You can see that's part of the design up here in the upper left. So without further ado, pause the screencast and make the navigation bar look as close to our design as you can. Navigation bar look and see that's part of the design up here in the upper left. So without further ado, pause it because this gave it its sort working. Okay, because, well, you could just give it a class name and call it a paragraph. And the elements on the screen. Now, we talked about earlier how one nav class name as well. I'm going to put display flex. We'll say align items in the center. From the design, we can find that the background color is this color here. It also looks like it has about 30 pixels of padding on the top and bottom and 25 pixels of padding on the left and right. And we can also see from the design that it has a height of about 90 pixels. Okay, so it doesn't look like our top and bottom margin is applying, and I suspect that's either because our image is a little bit too large, or I think maybe more likely because our H3 and H4 here have some top and bottom margin by default. So I think I might just select the H3 directly inside of the nav. Let's say margin is 0, and then let's see if that also works for the H4. Okay, it might be that the image is just a little too large. Let's take a look at the image, and it looks like from the design it's got a height of about 30 pixels. Okay, so maybe our padding is doing fine, and it was just that the image was a little bit large. While we're here dealing with the image, I'm going to give it a margin right, just to bump it away from the text there a little bit. We'll say, I think the design shows it's about 7 pixels. That looks pretty good. And let's go ahead and use the margin right of auto on our H3, just to bump that H4 all the way to the right side. Cool. All right, well, while we're H3, that looks pretty good. And let's go ahead and use the margin right of auto on our H3, just to That looks pretty good. And let's go ahead and use the margin right of auto on our H3 just to bump that H4. All the way to the right side. Cool. All right. Well, while we're working on that, we can go ahead and give the color to our React facts. So we'll say the color is this color from the design. Okay. That does it for the color. Let's get the fonts right. And actually, I think all of the fonts on this page are inter, so I'm just going to change that in the body. We'll say inter, and then I think a backup of sans serif. You can also see from the design that the React Facts logo words there have a font weight of 700, so we'll bold those up a little bit. Or maybe that's the default, doesn't look like it's making much of a difference. And then let's do the same thing for our H4. It has this color from the design, and it looks like it has a font weight of 600. Okay, that's making a slight difference, so that's good. And it kind of looks to me like React Facts maybe needs to be a little bit bigger. And yeah, I can see from the design that it has a font size of something around 22 pixels. Okay, that's looking awesome. It has like it have fonts, and actually it will cool of auto design is get the image will snap. This one on H3 maybe. Dash, and then we'll say this is part of the nav. This is a really excellent start. Frankly, most of what we did here is learn some of the missing. Then let's move on to that we're going to actually address later. But when, okay, let's work on these bullets exercise. We will that as the main element, we can go ahead and body on top, which is going to be a full height. And it looks like maybe it's some issues here. Now, I haven't set up my body or my main element to be a full height. And it looks like maybe it's a collapsing margin. I'm guessing this H1 has a margin on top, which is causing this whole section to collapse down below. So let's give, first of all, the main section a height of, let's try 100%. Yeah, sometimes that doesn't work. Maybe if I give my body height, you know what? I think the background color to the body so that it does cover everything. Okay, and that'll be a good enough. Is not taking up the body. Okay, and padding 57. You know what? I think that's margin here. Let's get our color pixels work. My H1 make quite a bit of items. I'm fairly accurate. Right, this to them same color as thought it could originally matching this. So just slightly selects the last. This is what we're fixing. That's going fairly way to the right. This probably isn't much of a problem. If I did want to fix that, I could probably just apply a max width on my list items. That way, it's not taking up the entire left to right. Maybe two over here to the right. We're going to cover a little bit larger selector. There's a little bit, and believe it or not, this very specifically selects the bullets on list items. And even look at this example. It's changing the color and it's making it a little bit larger with its font size. That's exactly what we want to do. You can click this slide to go check out the docs, poke around these allowable properties, and of course, you should probably play with this a little bit, but fortunately, this is a really easy thing for us to implement. I'm just going to copy this and add my pseudo element selector for marker. One thing to keep in mind is that this is not accepted by all browsers. However, Safari, Firefox, and newer versions of Chrome have all adopted the marker pseudo element selector, and I'm certain as time passes, this is going to become even more widely accepted, and therefore I feel pretty confident using this method for accomplishing this task. So, simply enough, I can change the font size to, let's say, something like 1.4 rem, and sure enough, that made our bullets a little bit larger. Now, as I was playing with this, I noticed that if we get too large, let's say 3 rem, things become pretty misaligned, and at least at this time when I was researching, I could not find a good way to realign these bullets with the text. So, pretty misaligned, and at least at this time when I was researching, I could not find a good way to realign these bullets with the text. So in my playing around, I found that 1.4 made the bullets larger without getting them misaligned with the text. So for now we have that limitation. I'm just going to work within that and say the font size is 1.4 rem. It's not quite as large as what we have here, but that's okay. And then again, simply enough, I'm just going to go take the color of our text here. This is the blue color that we want, and stick it right here as our color. And sure enough, we have the blue color on the bullets. Easy peasy. Well, I hope you didn't become too comfortable letting me do all the work, because in the next screencast, we are going to add this logo. And by we, I of course mean you, in a challenge. So that's what we'll do in the next screencast. I actually debated a little bit whether or not I should include this as a real challenge for this section, only because it touches on some CSS that you may not be super familiar with. But in the end, I settled on remembering that you guys are capable and you can use Google to your advantage just like a real developer. So here under images as React icon large.png, something important to know about this icon that's off of tier as image to this / React page. So here by default, it puts it in the upper left of our page, or rather the main element. And this is where background position comes in. Now background, we can say logo becomes Y. We can specify something like top, which is where it is now, or bottom. Bottom, I think, is a touch too low, although center is maybe a top, which is the page. This is where there we position is package. Repeat is repeating around the entire React icon relative to my style.css file. So I'm going to say /images / React icon large.png. Okay, and we see that it automatically is repeating around the entire page. So that's where the background repeat comes in, and we want to say no repeat. Of course, here by default, it puts it in the upper left of our page, or rather the main element. And this is where background position comes in. Now, background position is actually a combination of background position X and background position Y. In fact, let's start out there. We can say background position X, that's my position to the left and right. I want to push it all the way to the right. This is where having half of a logo becomes pretty handy for us, because it automatically looks like it's bleeding off the side of the page. And then with background position Y, we can specify something like top, which is where it is now, or bottom. Bottom, I think, is a touch too low, although center is maybe a touch too high. I can also use percentages, so we can split the difference and say something like 75%. And now that we've seen these as two separate properties, I actually can just combine these and say background position, which is background position X, and then I'll use a space and then Y of 75%, and that simplifies it a bit. If I really wanted to, I could use the shorthand background property, which would be background, and then I would just copy and paste this one first, space, this one, space, this one. Honestly, I always forget what the background property is short for, so I'm actually going to leave these as three separate properties so that in the future, it's really easy for me to remember what each of those pieces means. And awesome, this represents a culmination of everything that we've learned so far about React. Let me go ahead and clean up this challenge. Now, of course, we've been spending a bit of time in CSS land here, and as I've mentioned, I still think that's a really important thing to do. Even though our main focus in this course is to learn React, it's really important to synthesize some of that other information that you have learned in the past so that it doesn't become stale to you and you just forget it. That being said, in the next screencast, let's spend some time looking back at everything that we did learn about React, because that's actually what we're here to learn. And so there's going to be a few, whether it be these occurs. Let's in the very lower, as far as actually coding the project goes, I recommend that if you click that, your project here at the top and choose to do this screen about losing your setup for the digital business card here. And while you're building it, I want you to make separate components for the info section, which is what I'm calling this whole top half